The rain stung his face like 1,000 tiny betrayals, each drop a reminder of the night his world shattered. At 17, Ethan Caldwell stood on the curb outside his family's sprawling Connecticut estate, clutching a duffel bag, his heart pounding as his father's words echoed, "You're no son of mine." Now, 15 years later, he was back not as the broken boy they'd cast out, but as a billionaire who'd clawed his way to the top, ready to unravel the lie that had haunted him since. Ethan's private jet touched down at Bradley International Airport under a slate-gray sky, the kind that promised storms. He adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke navy suit, the fabric whispering wealth, and stepped into the waiting car. The driver, a quiet man named Paul, glanced at him through the rearview mirror. "Back home, Mr. Caldwell?" he asked, voice neutral but curious. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Home." The word tasted like ash. "Just business," he replied, his voice smooth but edged with something raw. He wasn't here for nostalgia. He was here for answers. 15 years ago, Ethan had been a lanky teenager with dreams bigger than the manicured lawns of Greenwich. He'd loved theater, poetry, and, secretly, a boy named Jamie from his high school's art club. When his father, Richard Caldwell, a titan of the pharmaceutical industry, caught them kissing in the garden gazebo, the fallout was swift and brutal. Richard's face had contorted with rage. His mother, Evelyn, had wept silently, and his older sister, Claire, had turned away, unable to meet his eyes. By morning, Ethan was on the street, disowned for being gay, with nothing but a few clothes and a heart full of shame. He'd survived, though. New York City became his crucible. Waiting tables, coding late into the night. He built a tech startup from nothing. Now, at 32, Ethan Caldwell was the CEO of Lamora, a company revolutionizing renewable energy, worth billions. His face graced Forbes covers, his name synonymous with innovation. Yet, the ache of that night never faded. Why had his family lied about the trust fund they claimed was gone? Why had Claire, once his confidant, never reached out? And why, after all these years, had they invited him back? The car wound through Greenwich's tree-lined streets, past mansions that screamed old money. Ethan's phone buzzed a text from Leo, his assistant and closest friend. "You sure about this? You don't owe them anything." Ethan's fingers hovered over the screen. Leo was right. But the invitation from Claire, cryptic and urgent, had stirred something in him. "Family emergency. Please come. We need to talk." He hadn't seen her in 15 years. Yet her words carried a weight he couldn't ignore. The Caldwell estate loomed ahead, its iron gates unchanged, though the ivy seemed wilder, more defiant. Ethan stepped out, his polished shoes crunching on gravel. The front door opened before he could knock, and there stood Claire, her blonde hair pulled back, her eyes wide with something between relief and fear. "Ethan," she whispered, stepping forward as if to hug him, then stopping short. "You're really here." "Claire," he said, his voice cool but not cruel. "What's this about?" She glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to eavesdrop. "It's Dad. He's dying. And there's something you need to know." Ethan's pulse quickened. Richard Caldwell, the man who'd called him an abomination, was dying. He should have felt nothing, but a strange mix of grief and anger churned inside him. "What do I need to know?" he asked, stepping inside. The foyer smelled of polished wood and roses, just as it had when he was a child. But the air felt heavier now, thick with secrets. Claire led him to the study, where their mother, Evelyn, sat by a roaring fire. She looked older, her once vibrant beauty softened by time and worry. "Ethan," she said, rising, her voice trembling. "I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," he admitted, his gaze steady. But Claire's message said it was urgent. "So, what's the lie? What's been kept from me?" Evelyn's eyes darted to Claire, who nodded slightly. "It's about the trust fund," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't gone. Dad, he hid it. used it for his own deals. But there's more. Something worse. Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. He'd always suspected the trust fund story was a convenient excuse, but hearing it confirmed felt like a fresh wound. Worse. He pressed, his voice low. Dangerous. Claire hesitated, then handed him a folder. These are documents I found in Dad's office. They're about you. About why he really sent you away. Ethan opened the folder, his eyes scanning the pages. Bank statements, emails, and a handwritten letter in his father's scrawl. His breath caught as he read the words, "Keep him out. He can't know about the merger. His shares would ruin everything." Ethan's mind raced. Shares. Merger. He'd been a teenager, not a shareholder. What was this? Explain, he demanded. Looking up, Claire's voice shook. Dad's company was in trouble back then. A merger with a rival was the only way to save it. But you were a threat. Your trust fund included shares. Voting shares. That could have blocked it. He lied to you. Ethan. He didn't just kick you out because you were gay. He did it to protect his empire. The room spun. Ethan sank into a chair, the folder trembling in his hands. All these years, he'd carried the weight of rejection, believing it was his identity that had broken his family. But it was greed. Power. A calculated betrayal. He looked at his mother, who was crying silently. Did you know? He asked, his voice breaking. Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face. I was weak. Ethan. I let him do it. I'm so sorry. The fire crackled, filling the silence. Ethan's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of his past. He'd built a life from nothing. But this truth changed everything. He wasn't just a cast-out son. He was a pawn in a game he hadn't known he was playing. And now, with Richard dying, the board was shifting again. I need to see him, Ethan said finally. Standing. Where is he? Claire pointed upstairs. He's weak, but he's awake. Ethan, he's not the same man. Be prepared. As Ethan climbed the grand staircase, his heart pounded with a mix of dread and resolve. He wasn't here for forgiveness. He was here for the truth and maybe, just maybe, to reclaim what was his. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and regret, a sterile contrast to the opulence below. Ethan's footsteps echoed on the hardwood as he approached his father's bedroom, each step heavier than the last. He paused at the door, hand hovering over the knob, wondering if the man inside was still the tyrant who'd shattered his world or something else entirely. He pushed the door open. Richard Caldwell lay in a four-poster bed, a shadow of the imposing figure Ethan remembered. Tubes snaked from his arms to machines that beeped softly, their rhythm a countdown. His father's eyes, once sharp with judgment, were clouded but alert, locking onto Ethan with a flicker of recognition. You came, Richard rasped, his voice like gravel. Ethan stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, his tailored suit a silent rebuke to the man who'd left him with nothing. Not for you, he said coldly. For the truth. Claire told me about the shares, the merger, the lie. Richard's face twitched, a ghost of the old anger surfacing before it faded into something softer resignation. Maybe. You've done well. Boy, he said, coughing. Better than I expected. Don't. Ethan snapped, stepping closer. Don't act like you're proud. You threw me out. You lied about the trust fund. You made me think it was because of who I am. Richard's eyes drifted to the window, where rain streaked the glass. It wasn't just that, he admitted, his voice barely audible. The merger, it was everything. My legacy. Your shares would have given you power. Too much power. I couldn't risk it. Ethan's fists clenched. So you chose your company over your son. I chose survival. Richard countered, his gaze sharpening. You were young. Reckless. You wouldn't have understood. I did what I had to. The words landed like a blow, but Ethan refused to flinch. He'd spent years rebuilding himself, turning pain into power. He leaned in, his voice low and steady. You didn't just kick me out. You erased me. And now you're dying. And you think you can justify it. Richard's breath hitched. A wet, ragged sound. I don't expect forgiveness, he said. But there's more you don't know. Ask your mother about the letters. Letters? Ethan's brow furrowed. He turned to leave. But Richard's voice stopped him. Ethan, he said. Softer now. I followed your career. Lamora. Impressive. Ethan didn't respond. He walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. His mind churned. Letters. What else had they hidden? Downstairs, he found Evelyn in the study, still clutching a tissue. Claire stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. What letters? Ethan demanded, his voice cutting through the room. Evelyn's eyes widened, then dropped to the floor. I wrote to you, she said, her voice trembling. After you left. Every month for 2 years. I sent them to the address you gave Claire before you cut contact. But you never answered. Ethan's heart stuttered. I never got any letters, he said, his voice tight. I was in a shelter for months. Then a shared apartment in Brooklyn. I didn't have a stable address. Evelyn's face crumpled. I didn't know, she whispered. Your father, he said he'd handle it. He said he'd make sure you were okay. Ethan's laugh was bitter. Okay. I was homeless. Mom. I ate out of dumpsters some nights. And you're telling me you wrote letters. Claire stepped forward, her face pale. I sent you money once. 2. A check. It came back undelivered. I thought you didn't want us. The room felt too small, the air too thick. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process it. His family hadn't just abandoned him, he'd been lied to, manipulated, just as he had. But by whom? Richard. Someone else. He needed answers. But the pieces weren't fitting yet. I'm staying in town, he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. I'll be at the Greenwich Hotel. Call me when you're ready to tell me everything. He left the estate, the rain soaking his suit as he climbed into the car. Paul, the driver, glanced back. Rough visit, sir. You have no idea, Ethan muttered, staring out the window. His phone buzzed another text from Leo. How'd it go? Need me to fly out? Ethan typed back, stay put. This just got complicated. At the hotel, Ethan checked into a suite overlooking the town. He poured himself a whiskey from the minibar, the burn grounding him as he opened the folder Claire had given him. The documents were a maze of financial jargon, but one name kept appearing, Victor Hensley, his father's old business partner. Victor had been a shadow in Ethan's childhood, always lurking at board meetings, his smile too sharp. The merger had been with Hensley's company, a deal that saved Caldwell Pharmaceuticals but cost Ethan his family. A memory flashed Victor at a Christmas party, whispering to Richard, both men glancing at Ethan with strange intensity. He'd been 12, oblivious. Now, it felt like a clue. He pulled out his laptop and fired off an email to Leo, dig into Victor Hensley. Everything you can find, past and present. The next morning, Ethan met Claire at a cafe in town. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed. I went through more of Dad's files last night, she said, sliding a USB drive across the table. There's something about a second trust fund. Not yours. Mine. But it's tied to you somehow. Ethan's pulse quickened. Tied to me how? I don't know, Claire admitted. But Victor Hensley's name is all over it. And there's a mention of a lawyer in San Francisco. Daniel Ruiz. He handled the trust. San Francisco, Ethan's current home. The coincidence felt like fate or a trap. I'm flying back tomorrow, he said. I'll find Ruiz. But Claire, if you're holding anything back, now's the time to tell me. She met his gaze, her eyes fierce. I'm on your side, Ethan. I was too young to fight for you then. I'm not now. He wanted to believe her. But trust was a luxury he couldn't afford not yet. As he left the cafe, the weight of the USB drive in his pocket felt like a ticking bomb. Whatever was in those files, it was the key to unraveling the lie that had defined his life. San Francisco greeted Ethan with its familiar chaos, cable cars rattling, fog curling around the Golden Gate Bridge, and the hum of a city that never slept. He'd built his empire here, in a glass-walled office overlooking the bay. But today he felt like a stranger in his own life. The USB drive from Claire burned a hole in his pocket, its contents a tangle of questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. In his office at Lamora, Ethan plugged the drive into his laptop. The files were encrypted, but Leo, a wizard with code, cracked them in an hour. "You're not going to like this," Leo said, his usual smirk gone as he handed over a tablet. The screen showed scanned documents, contracts, emails, and a will. Victor Hensley's name appeared repeatedly, alongside references to a secondary trust and Ethan's name. One line stood out: shares to be transferred to Claire Caldwell upon Ethan's disinheritance. Ethan's stomach twisted. "So, Claire benefits if I'm out of the picture," he said, his voice flat. "She didn't mention that." Leo leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes searching Ethan's face. "You think she's playing you?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "She seemed genuine. But this, it changes things." He scrolled further, finding an email from Victor to Richard, dated the month Ethan was kicked out. "The boy's gone. The shares are secure. Proceed with the merger." Ethan's jaw clenched. Victor hadn't just been a bystander, it orchestrated it. Leo tapped the tablet. "There's more. That lawyer, Daniel Ruiz. He's still practicing in the city. Got an office in the Mission District. You want me to set up a meeting?" "Do it," Ethan said, standing. "And keep digging on Hensley. I want to know where he is now." The meeting with Daniel Ruiz was set for that afternoon. Ethan drove himself, needing the solitude to think. The Mission District buzzed with murals and street vendors, a stark contrast to Greenwich's polished wealth. Ruiz's office was a modest storefront, its sign faded but proud. Inside, Daniel Ruiz, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a graying ponytail, greeted Ethan warmly. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, shaking his hand. "I've followed your work. Lamora's changing the world." "Thanks," Ethan said, his tone clipped. "I'm here about my family. Specifically, a trust fund and Victor Hensley." Ruiz's smile faltered. "Hensley," he said, sitting back. "That's a name I haven't heard in a while. What do you know?" "Not enough," Ethan said, sliding the USB drive across the desk. "My sister found these. They mention a secondary trust, my disinheritance, and you." Ruiz plugged the drive into his computer, his brow furrowing as he read. "This is complicated," he said after a moment. "Your father hired me to manage the trust fund when you were born. It included shares in Caldwell Pharmaceuticals, significant ones. When you were disowned, those shares were supposed to revert to the company. But Victor Hensley intervened. He convinced your father to redirect them to a secondary trust, nominally for Claire, but controlled by Hensley himself." Ethan's blood ran cold. "So, Victor stole my inheritance?" "Not exactly," Ruiz said. "He couldn't access the funds directly, but he used the shares to secure his position in the merger. Without you, he had leverage over your father. Richard was desperate to save the company, and Victor exploited that." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. "And the letters my mother sent, where did they go?" Ruiz hesitated. "I don't know about any letters. But if they were sent to an address you didn't have, Victor had a habit of tying up loose ends. He might have intercepted them." The idea hit Ethan like a punch. Victor hadn't just orchestrated his exile, it ensured Ethan stayed cut off, isolated. "Where's Hensley now?" Ethan asked. Ruiz sighed. "Last I heard, he's in New York, running a hedge fund. But be careful, Mr. Caldwell. Victor's not the type to let old secrets resurface without a fight." Back at his apartment, Ethan poured another whiskey, his mind racing. Leo had sent a dossier on Hensley, a slick, silver-haired man in his 60s. now a Wall Street player with a reputation for ruthlessness. The dossier included a photo from a recent gala. Victor smirking beside a young man in a tuxedo, someone who looked vaguely familiar. Ethan squinted, his heart skipping. Was that Jamie? Jamie Torres. The boy he'd loved at 17. The one whose kiss had cost him everything. Ethan hadn't seen him since that night in the gazebo. But the resemblance was uncanny. He texted Leo, "Find out who the guy with Hensley is." Now. As he waited, Ethan's thoughts drifted to Jamie. They'd been kids. Reckless and in love. Stealing moments in art class. Dreaming of a future they couldn't have. After Ethan was kicked out, Jamie had vanished, no calls. No messages. Ethan had assumed he'd moved on. But what if Victor had gotten to him, too? His phone buzzed. Leo's text, "Guy in the photo is Jamie Torres. Works for Hensley's fund. Lives in Manhattan. You know him." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Yeah," he muttered to himself. "I know him." The past was colliding with the present. And Victor Hensley was at the center of it all. Ethan booked a flight to New York for the next morning. If Jamie was tied to Victor, he might hold the final piece of the puzzle. As the plane took off, Ethan stared out the window, the San Francisco skyline fading into the fog. He wasn't just chasing the truth anymore, was chasing closure. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to reclaim the life that was stolen from him. New York City pulsed with a restless energy, its skyscrapers clawing at the night sky. Ethan's hotel suite in Manhattan overlooked Central Park, but he barely noticed the view. His focus was on the dossier Leo had updated. Jamie Torres, now 32, was a senior analyst at Hensley's hedge fund. His LinkedIn profile polished but sparse. The photo from the gala haunted Ethan. Jamie's smile, once so open, now guarded, standing too close to Victor Hensley. Ethan hadn't slept. His mind churned with memories of Jamie, late-night talks about art, stolen kisses behind the school's art studio. The way Jamie's laugh had made him feel invincible. And then, the night in the gazebo, when Richard caught them. Jamie had run, tears in his eyes, and Ethan never heard from him again. Had Victor gotten to him? Threatened him? Or was Jamie complicit in whatever game Victor was playing? Leo met Ethan at a diner near Wall Street, sliding into the booth with a laptop. Found Jamie's address. Leo said, keeping his voice low. Upper West Side. He's got a penthouse. Hensley pays well. You sure you want to do this in person? I need to see him, Ethan said, stirring his coffee without drinking it. If he's working for Victor, he knows something. Leo raised an eyebrow. And if he's loyal to Hensley, you're walking into a lion's den. Man. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then I'll tame the lion. That evening, Ethan stood outside Jamie's building, a sleek tower with a doorman who eyed him suspiciously. He dressed down jeans, a leather jacket to avoid drawing attention, but his presence still commanded notice. The doorman buzzed Jamie's apartment, and after a tense moment, the intercom crackled. Send him up, Jamie's voice said, low and cautious. The elevator ride felt eternal. When the doors opened, Jamie stood in the hallway, leaner than Ethan remembered, his dark hair longer, his brown eyes wary. Ethan, he said, his voice catching. What the hell are you doing here? I could ask you the same, Ethan replied, stepping closer. You're working for Victor Hensley, the man who helped ruin my life. Jamie flinched, but he didn't deny it. He gestured inside, and Ethan followed, taking in the penthouse's minimalist luxury white walls. Abstract art, a view of the city that screamed wealth. Jamie poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handing one to Ethan. You look good, Jamie said, his tone softer. I saw you on Forbes. Never thought I'd see you again. Then why didn't you reach out? Ethan asked, his voice sharp. After that night, you disappeared. I thought you hated me. Jamie's eyes dropped to his glass. I didn't have a choice, he said. Your father, he came to my house the next day. Said if I contacted you, he'd make sure my family lost everything. My mom was a single parent. Ethan, we were barely scraping by. I was scared. Ethan's chest tightened. And Victor? How'd you end up with him? Jamie hesitated, then sat on the couch, motioning for Ethan to join him. After high school, I got a scholarship to NYU. Finance. I was good at it. Victor recruited me out of college. Said he knew my potential. I didn't realize until later he was connected to your dad. By then, I was in too deep. In deep how? Ethan pressed, sitting but keeping distance between them. Jamie's hands shook slightly. Victor's fund. It's not just investments. He uses it to control people. Information. Leverage. Secrets. He knew about us. Ethan. Used it to keep me in line. Said if I stepped out, he'd ruin you. Too. Ethan's mind raced. Victor hadn't just taken his inheritance seed, weaponized his past. His love for Jamie. To build an empire of control. What does he have on you now? Ethan asked. Jamie met his gaze. His eyes raw. Nothing. Anymore. I've been trying to get out. But Victor doesn't let go easily. And there's something else. He's got files on your family. On you. Stuff that could destroy Caldwell Pharmaceuticals if it got out. Ethan leaned forward. What kind of files? Financial records. Jamie said. Proof your dad cooked the books during the merger. And something about your mother. I don't know the details. But Victor's been holding it over them for years. Ethan's pulse pounded. He stood, pacing. I need those files. Jamie. And I need you to help me get them. Jamie's laugh was bitter. You think it's that easy? Victor's paranoid. His office is a fortress, cameras. Security. Encrypted servers. And he's got people everywhere. Then we outsmart him. Ethan said, his voice steady. I didn't build Lamora by playing fair. I know how to take risks. Jamie studied him. A flicker of the old spark in his eyes. You haven't changed, he said softly. Still fearless. Not fearless, Ethan corrected. Just done running. They talked late into the night, piecing together a plan. Jamie knew Victor's routines, his weaknesses. There was a gala tomorrow night, a high-profile event where Victor would be distracted. It was their best shot to access his office. Ethan felt the old pull toward Jamie, the warmth of their shared past. But he pushed it down. This wasn't about love, not yet. It was about justice. As he left Jamie's apartment, the city glittering below, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Claire, Dad's worse. Doctors say days, not weeks. Hurry. Ethan's heart sank. Time was running out, and the truth was still just out of reach. But with Jamie on his side, he was closer than ever. Tomorrow, at the gala, they'd strike. The gala was a glittering cage of wealth and ambition, held in a Manhattan ballroom draped in chandeliers and velvet. Ethan, in a tailored black tuxedo, blended into the crowd of tycoons and socialites. But his eyes were fixed on Victor Hensley. The man stood at the center of the room, his silver hair gleaming, his smile ablaze. Beside him, Jamie played the part of loyal employee, his expression unreadable. Ethan's heart raced, not from nerves, but from the weight of what was at stake. He and Jamie had spent the previous night mapping out Victor's office layout, courtesy of Jamie's access. The plan was simple but dangerous. Jamie would distract Victor during the gala, while Ethan slipped into the office to hack the server. Leo had provided a custom USB drive loaded with software to bypass Victor's encryption. If they pulled this off, they'd have the files that could expose everything. Jamie caught Ethan's eye across the room, giving a subtle nod. It was time. Ethan slipped out of the ballroom, his steps silent on the marble floor. Victor's office was on the top floor, a glass-walled fortress overlooking the city. The elevator ride felt like a countdown. When the doors opened, Ethan moved quickly, disabling the hallway camera with a device Leo had given him. Inside the office, the air was cold, sterile. Victor's desk was a slab of black marble. His computer a sleek, password-protected beast. Ethan plugged in the USB drive, the screen flickering as Leo's software went to work. Minutes dragged like hours. His phone vibrated a text from Jamie. He's suspicious. Hurry. The software chimed, granting access. Ethan's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up files labeled Caldwell Merger and Evelyn. The merger files confirmed what Ruiz had said, falsified financials, backroom deals, Victor's signature on every page. But the Evelyn folder stopped Ethan cold. It contained photos grainy, time-stamped images of his mother meeting with a man Ethan didn't recognize, dated just before he was kicked out. There were emails, too, between Victor and Evelyn, hinting at an affair. Keep this quiet, or Richard loses everything. One read. Ethan's stomach churned. His mother had been blackmailed. Victor hadn't just manipulated Richard, had controlled Evelyn, too, using her secrets to ensure Ethan's exile. He copied the files to the USB drive, his hands shaking with rage. As the transfer completed, the door clicked open. Ethan Caldwell. Victor's voice drawled, smooth and venomous. I should have known you'd come sniffing. Ethan spun, yanking the USB drive free. Victor stood in the doorway, a glass of champagne in hand, his smile chilling. Behind him, 2 security guards loomed. Jamie warned me you might try something, Victor said. Loyal boy, but not to you. Ethan's heart sank. Jamie. No, it couldn't be. You're lying, he said, stepping forward. Victor laughed. Am I? He's been mine for years. You think you can waltz back into his life and play hero? Before Ethan could respond, Jamie appeared behind the guards, his face pale. Ethan, run, he shouted, shoving one guard into the other. Chaos erupted. Ethan bolted, dodging a guard's grab, and sprinted for the stairwell. Jamie followed, their footsteps pounding as Victor's shouts echoed behind them. They burst onto the street, losing themselves in the city's chaos. Ethan's lungs burned as they ducked into an alley, panting. You didn't betray me, Ethan said, searching Jamie's eyes. Never, Jamie said, his voice fierce. He saw me texting you. I had to play along to get you out. Ethan clutched the USB drive, the weight of its contents grounding him. We've got what we need, he said. But Victor's not done. He'll come for us. Then we hit first, Jamie said, his jaw set. Take this to the press. The SEC. Anyone who'll listen. Ethan nodded, a plan forming. But first, he had to get back to Connecticut. Richard was fading, and Evelyn needed to know the truth about her own betrayal. As they hailed a cab, Ethan's phone buzzed. Claire again. Dad's asking for you. Please come. In the cab, Jamie reached for Ethan's hand, his touch tentative but warm. I never stopped thinking about you, he admitted. All these years, I wondered what you became. Ethan squeezed his hand, the past and present blurring. You're about to find out, he said. They were in this together now, and Victor Hensley was about to face a reckoning. The Connecticut estate felt like a tomb as Ethan and Jamie stepped inside, the air heavy with the scent of lilies and impending loss. Claire met them at the door, her face drawn. He's barely holding on, she said, glancing at Jamie with curiosity but no judgment. Who's this? Jamie Torres, Ethan said, his voice steady. He's with me. Claire nodded, leading them upstairs. In Richard's room, the machines beeped slower now, a grim metronome. Evelyn sat by the bed, her eyes red but resolute. Richard looked at Ethan, his face gaunt but his gaze sharp. You brought company, he rasped, eyeing Jamie. He's part of this, Ethan said, pulling out the USB drive. We found proof. Dad, Victor Hensley didn't just push me out, blackmailed Mom, rigged the merger, and stole my shares. Evelyn gasped, covering her mouth. What are you talking about? Ethan handed her the drive, explaining the files, the photos, the emails, Victor's grip on their family. Evelyn's tears fell as she read, her hands trembling. I thought I was protecting you, she whispered. Victor said if I didn't cooperate, he'd ruin us all. I had an affair, Ethan, before you were born. Victor found out, used it to control me. Richard's cough broke the silence. I knew, he said, his voice weak. I forgave her. But Victor, he played us both. I thought sending you away would protect the company. Protect you. Protect me. Ethan's voice cracked. You let me think I was worthless. Richard's eyes glistened. I was wrong, he said. I see that now. You're stronger than I ever was. The room fell silent, the weight of years settling between them. Ethan wanted to hate him, but the man before him was broken. Human. I'm taking Victor down, Ethan said finally. For all of us. He and Jamie returned to the study, where Claire was waiting. I contacted a friend at the SEC. She said, she'll meet you tomorrow. If these files are as damning as you say, Victor's finished. Ethan nodded, but his mind was on Jamie. They stepped outside, the night air cool against their skin. You didn't have to come, Ethan said. This is my fight. It's ours, Jamie corrected, his eyes fierce. Victor used me to hurt you. I'm done being his pawn. Ethan's heart ached with the weight of their shared past. He stepped closer, their breaths mingling in the dark. I never stopped loving you, he admitted, the words raw, unguarded. Jamie's smile was soft. Pained. Me neither. But we've got work to do first. They spent the night planning, poring over the files with Claire. By dawn, they had a strategy: leak the files to the press, hand copies to the SEC, and confront Victor publicly at his next investor meeting. It was risky, but Ethan thrived on risk. Lamora hadn't been built on caution. The next day, they met Claire's SEC contact, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel who promised swift action. This is enough to open an investigation, she said, scanning the files. Hensley's fund will be under a microscope by next week. As they left the meeting, Ethan's phone buzzed a news alert. Victor had announced a sudden press conference, claiming a major financial breakthrough. Ethan's gut twisted. He knows, he said to Jamie. He's trying to get ahead of us. They raced to the press conference, held at Victor's Manhattan headquarters. The room was packed with reporters, investors, and cameras. Victor stood at a podium, his smile polished, but Ethan saw the tension in his eyes. As Victor spoke about new opportunities, Ethan stepped forward, holding up the USB drive. Victor Hensley's been lying to you all, Ethan said, his voice carrying over the crowd. Gasps rippled through the room. He rigged a merger 15 years ago, stole my inheritance, and blackmailed my family. I have proof. Victor's face paled, but he recovered quickly. This is absurd, he said, laughing. Mr. Caldwell is a disgruntled former heir with a vendetta. Then explain these, Ethan said, projecting the files onto a screen behind Victor. The crowd murmured as emails and financials appeared. Undeniable. Reporters scrambled, cameras flashing. Victor's smile faltered. Security moved toward Ethan, but Jamie stepped in front, his voice fierce. Touch him, and I'll testify about everything you made me do. Victor froze, his empire crumbling in real time. As the crowd erupted, Ethan felt a strange calm. The truth was out. Victor was finished. But the real victory was standing beside Jamie, facing the past together. The fallout was swift and merciless. By morning, headlines screamed about Victor Hensley's fraud, the SEC freezing his assets and launching a full investigation. Reporters camped outside his office, while investors fled, their trust shattered. Ethan watched it unfold from his hotel room, the TV muted, his mind on the quiet moments that mattered more. He'd returned to Connecticut one last time. Richard passed that night, his final words to Ethan a whispered apology. You're my son, he'd said, his hand weak in Ethan's. Always were. Evelyn, freed from Victor's blackmail, clung to Ethan, promising to rebuild what they'd lost. Claire, too, vowed to make things right, offering to transfer the misdirected shares back to him. Ethan declined it, didn't need the money. Lamora was his legacy now. But the shares weren't the only thing he reclaimed. Jamie stood by him through it all. Their bond rekindled not just by love, but by shared resilience. They sat now on a bench overlooking Long Island Sound, the water glinting under a rare, clear sky. "What now?" Jamie asked, his hand brushing Ethan's. Ethan smiled, the weight of 15 years lifting. "We live," he said. "No more hiding. No more lies." They decided to start fresh together. Jamie quit Victor's fund, his skills already catching the eye of ethical firms. Ethan offered him a role at Lamora, but Jamie wanted to carve his own path. And Ethan respected that. Their love wasn't a fairy tale. It was hard-won, scarred, and real. Back in San Francisco, Ethan hosted a press conference of his own. Not to gloat, but to inspire. "I was kicked out for being who I am," he told the crowd, Jamie at his side. "But I built something better. Not just a companion life. Don't let anyone tell you who you can't be." The applause was deafening, but Ethan's eyes were on Jamie, whose smile held a promise of tomorrow. The family lie had been uncovered, the pain laid bare, but from it came truth, love, and a future Ethan had never dared dream of as a boy. He'd been cast out, but he'd returned not just a billionaire, but a manhole at last.